Hello, Richmond. My name is Matthew Hankla. I'm a historic restoration contractor here and been doing business in Richmond. I've seen a lot of these houses, and there's a lot of common issues with these houses that people don't know about. And here's just some my opinion of what to do, not to do with these old houses to keep them running good. So the first thing we'll talk about is the mortars. There's two types of mortars. You're going to have lime mortar versus Portland mortar. Lime mortar is about up until 1915, 1920, and then Portland 1920 on. The lime mortar, though, is breathable, it's softer, and it's self-healing. So why should you repoint with lime mortar versus Portland? Well, because the bricks are softer. So these are, soft old bricks. If you put something really hard in between the bricks, like type S mortar, it can crack up the bricks and cause spalling, which is where the face of the brick actually breaks off. Because if you have a really hard mortar here and really hard mortar here, when the sun is beating down on it, it's going to heat this area up and expand it. And if the bricks can't expand this way because there's hard mortar here, and they can't expand this way because there's hard mortar here, it's gonna break up the bricks over time. It's gonna crush the bricks because these are old soft bricks. Now, 1920s and on, they had more industrialized, harder brick manufacturing processes, so it's fine to use that. A basic tip or basic principle would be just use whatever mortar to repoint that the house had in it originally, because that's going to work well with the bricks or the building material used. So definitely don't use type S on old soft bricks. That's the wrong kind of mortar. And definitely don't use caulk either. I've seen a lot of caulk used in the mortar joints, which is weird because it's not really meant for that, but also it definitely gets into the bricks, and then if you try and remove the caulk to replace it with the right kind of mortar, it'll rip chunks of the bricks out with it, which is kind of weird, but I guess it's because the old bricks are sort of porous, and so the caulk can actually impregnate the matrix of the old bricks. So if you try and pry that caulk out or rip it out, it's gonna be pulling. It kind of like has roots in the bricks. It's going to be pulling some of that out with it. So you don't want to use either of those on the old soft bricks. You want to pretty much just use probably lime if it was originally lime, or a softer Portland like type N. Now a good resource, just throwing this out there, I'm not sponsored by them or anything. A good resource is limeworks.us. They're out of Telford, Pennsylvania. I've been there, I've met them. They're great, knowledgeable, nice people, and they have lab essays they can do. If you want to send them a sample, they can match the color of your mortar. They can they can tell you what the mortar is made out of, whether it's lime or Portland. And they also have brick tests. So why should you use softer mortar than the bricks? You might think, oh well, Portland, that's waterproof. I'm getting some water into the house, rain or whatnot. So if I'm repointing the side of a house, why not use Portland because it's waterproof? Well, it's a basic principle of masonry. It's a basic principle of masonry that the binder should always be softer. The binder should always be softer than the building material. Building material being like stone, brick, block, tile, and then the binder is going to be like the grout, mortar, the stuff that holds it together. So it's easier to replace the binder than it is to replace the bricks or the block, the actual building blocks. Because if you do have bricks that are all cracked apart, maybe it's even worse than this. You're gonna have to cut this brick out and replace it with a new brick. And the old brick sizes are different from modern bricks, so you can't necessarily just go to the store and buy the exact same brick dimensions that your house was made out of. So it's easier to just repoint than it is to replace the bricks. So that's why you want to use whatever mortar, whatever mortar was originally used. Another beautiful thing about these old houses is that they're really solid construction. You've got 2 bricks thick minimum. Modern houses have just 1 brick thick on the framing. So these are sort of over-engineered or pre-engineering houses, just built like fortresses, which is really cool. And that's why so many have survived despite delayed maintenance. But anyway, so Richmond has groundwater. The groundwater can be coming up onto the foundation of the bricks. Now these, the foundations of these houses is just going to be, bricks in the clay. This is clay, and then here's the wall. This is the footer, which is just made of bricks itself. And then, here's the exterior wall, here's the inside of the house. And on the inside you have lime plaster. So what happens a lot of times is people will have, moisture issues on the inside. They'll have paint or plaster popping on the inside. And they try and remedy that by repointing it, hopefully not with the wrong kind of mortar. And they also paint it, which painting it with latex paint is unadvisable. You're going to be sealing moisture in, because what happens is if there's groundwater, if the water's coming from the groundwater and not from rain, let's say the rain isn't, as important. It may be, but if you have groundwater onto the house, wicking up, you're going to have groundwater coming up, wicking up the bricks like a wick, like an infuser or something. It's gonna be drawing it up from the moisture area to the drier area. And originally what would have happened is the air outside is drier than the groundwater, and so the bricks are going to be able to release that into the air once the air dries out. It's not going to be releasing it if it's a downpour, but as soon as the rain stops, it'll be able to evaporate it out to the air. So that's kind of the system that this worked. It was okay that the bricks, didn't have waterproofing. It's okay that the bricks are just in the clay. The clay has good compressive strength. It can actually act like structural. It's got a high PSI. But the water wicking up in the wall, usually it would evaporate out. Now, if you paint the outside of the wall and you seal that in, then the only other place the water can go is up and in, and that's where you're going to have plaster popping, you're going to have paint popping, that kind of bubbling paint look, and you're going to have that on the inside. So it's really not good to paint the exterior with latex paint. And the same thing is true on the inside. I've never seen a house that doesn't have painted plaster. You paint the plaster to get the colors of the walls, but then you're sealing it from both sides, and the moisture can actually wick all the way up to the second story of a house. Condition called rising damp. There's been some studies done on this, and it's been documented. That sort of condition. It's well known, especially in Europe. So you got water moving up. So my advice is don't paint the exterior. Doesn't matter as much painting the interior because they're all painted anyway. But don't paint the exterior of the old houses, especially the old common brick. The fronts of houses and the fan in the museum district are generally a more advanced brick, a more tight tolerance, sort of aesthetically pleasing brick. It's kind of like the show, the showpiece of the house was the front. So that's okay to paint more so than the common brick around the backs and the sides of the houses. I would not paint those with latex paint. Now there are paints available from Limeworks, such as potassium silicates, paints, which you can paint on the outside and it's still vapor permeable, so it still allows moisture to escape. And actually it benefits the evaporation of the walls because it it creates like a surface where when the water hits it, the water spreads out and can evaporate easier. So you can paint it with those. Those are going to be like a buff. It's not going to be shiny like a gloss, like a latex. It's going to be more of a buff or a matte finish. But they do have a lot of paints. So again, a great resource for Richmond, being that it's a historic brick city, and they're very helpful. Now this isn't always the case. How does the groundwater get in there? Why does this happen? I've called USGS, United States Geological Survey, to try and figure out a map of the groundwater, and I wasn't able to find anything like that. What they pretty much told me at USGS was that there's, groundwater in Richmond that can come all the way up to the surface. So it's just sort of the nature of the environment, as well as if there's been like a utilities installation that hasn't been backfilled or compacted enough, that can kind of be like a conduit of water to collect near the house. So there's all kinds of unseen, unknowable forces of water under and around the house, and that's fine as long as you allow it to evaporate and breathe, which is another beauty of the lime mortar. But specifically the old brick houses, you want to use the original mortar that was used so that it can function like it was originally supposed to function. And they didn't have latex paint back then, so sealing the outside just isn't a good idea. But yeah, hopefully this a little better appreciation of the sort of the science behind it, and hopefully this helps